Could everybody take their places, please?
In which case I'm off the hook. Let's carry on. Are you expecting? No.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the Leicestershire and Rutland Police and Crime Panel. This is a public meeting and it is being webcast, so just be aware, please can you switch your microphone on when speaking and turn it off when you finish speaking. The webcast will be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Okay. And as this is the first meeting of the municipal year, the first item on the agenda is election of chairman of the Police and Crime Panel for the 2017-18 year. Do I have any nominations for chairman of the panel?
Can I propose Joe Orson, please, Chairman?
Thank you. Would anyone like to second that? Okay. Do we have any other nominations as chair? Okay, then I confirm that Mr. Joe Orson, County Councillor, is elected Chair of the Police and Crime Panel for the 2017-18 year. And I will hand over to you, Joe.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. Before we go on to the business, we do have the item of election of Deputy Chair. Do I have a proposal anywhere? Lee?
Sorry, Chair. Happy to propose Trevor Pendleton as Chair.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? I'm not sure which one. I think Rutland just won that one.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair? Thank you very much, members. Welcome back, Trevor. Who's here today is a District Councillor.
Yes.
First of all, apologies from myself to all of you. I normally forget my hearing aids. Today, I have remembered my hearing aids, but I forgot my glasses. So, no.
Be careful with the dementia tank.
Now, sadly, there's a member from Harborough. Not sadly. I'm happy for the member from Harborough has retired and left us. But the one advantage Rosita always had was she always had a spare set of glasses in her handbag, which worked perfectly for me. But anyway, we move on. First of all, obviously, there's been quite a big change of personnel around the table. But I think before we go round for introductions, and obviously I will be asking everyone to say which areas they represent, whether it's Harborough or the city. But obviously we have had a number of members retired. We've had Rosita and Ozzy both step back. I don't think there's anyone else, is there? Just those two? Oh, and Lynn Senior. Lynn Senior is a member, actually, I've probably known the longest from the City Council. I go right back to the Police Authority days, which Angela will confirm. And Lynn was, my memory of Lynn in her council work would be certainly one who's 100% professional, 100% studious. You could rely she read her papers from the start to the finish. And I'm saddened to hear, I only heard today, that she's suffering with ill health. So we wish her all the best with her health issues. But it will be a sad loss losing Lynn, that experience she had of police work. Ozzy, he's moved on to be Deputy Chair of the County Council. So that's why I'm sure he's retired. And also, I understand he's Mayor of Hinckley as well. So I'm sure he's got a very busy agenda of him. And Rosita has decided just to take it easier at district, but to concentrate more at the county level. It's always disappointing when people leave you, but having said that, you need change, don't you? So it brings us on to a welcome of new members. And but I think, first of all, we will just shoot round the table as introductions before we get to that. For those of you who know me, I always go clockwise, and Trevor always clenches his fists like this because he knows what's coming. So, Trevor, to you first.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Trevor Pendleton, District Councillor, CSP Chair for North West Leicester Safety Partnership.
Hello everyone, my name's Michael Rickman. I'm Harborough District Council and I believe I'm CSP Chair for Harborough.
Hello, I'm David Slater. I'm a county councillor, but I'm here as leader of Charnwood Borough Council.
John Boyce, Oadby Wixton.
Ruth Camomile, I'm here representing Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council.
Councillor Lee Brecken, I'm Joint Chair of the Blaby and Hinckley and Bosworth Community Safety Partnership.
Mally's Graham, Chair of the Melton Safer Community Partnership.
Good afternoon, I'm Roger Bannister, Deputy Chief Constable from Leicestershire Police.
I'm Willie Bark, I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Kirkmaster, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Councillor Steve Correll, Leicester City Council.
Constable Angela Soth from City Council, and I'm the Chair for Leicester Council of Faith and High Bailiff.
Councillor Ratla Govin, Leicester City Council.
Councillor Abdul Osman, Chair of Leicester Partnership and also Assistant Mayor of Partnership and Change.
Helen Carter, Independent Member.
Robert Martin, Independent Member.
And I'm Ewan Walters. I work in Democratic Services here at the County Council, and I'm Secretariat to the Police and Crime Panel.
And Joe Wilson, representing Leicestershire County Council. So, welcome to Michael. Never met Michael in my life, although he comes from next door to Harborough, but I'm sure you're going to slip in very easily, Michael. He's the perfect new member. He's told me he's not going to say anything today, so... So I suspect that is going to be the catalyst for probably quite a spiel from him later on. Ruth Camomile, who's representing Hinckley, welcome to you, Ruth. I've known Ruth, certainly, I can definitely say for 12 years. Good, solid performer, so we look forward to your contributions, Ruth, from Hinckley. And Stephen, we worked out, it is 10 years ago since I first met you down in Bournemouth. In the days when Sheila Locke was the children's director at the City Council. I think you went on, was it Chairman of the Fire Authority at one point? Yeah, and he's telling me it's going to be an easy ride after that. But, yeah, but we'll see. So welcome to all three of you. With your okay, by the way, I would like to write a letter to all the three retiring members on your behalf, just to say thank you. Is that okay? Yep, okay. Manjula.
Thank you, Chair. So on behalf of all of us, I would like to say that Lynn Senior was a good colleague and good friend. She represented Castle Ward, which is one of the busiest wards in the city. And her contributions to her constituents are remarkable. Undoubtedly, she was a great great councillor. She worked for AUK, and she'll be fondly missed. It's due to her ill health. She has to step down. Okay.
And you're right, Manjula, she will be missed. Yeah. Anyway, you and I, well, hopefully Ewan will hopefully start to put a letter, and then I'll make a few contributions and then get it signed and get off to all three members. Now, moving on to the main item of the business, minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of March. As always, you don't have to approve them, but I'm still going to buzz through them to make sure you're happy. And I'll be quick, as always. Page 3. Malise.
A deliberate error at the top of page 3. We met at City Hall, Leicester City, rather than Glenfield.
Well spotted. Got to say, you city members didn't spot that. Thanks. Page 4. 5. 6. And 7. Okay. I haven't been advised of any urgent items at all, so we move on from that. Declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Manjula, we have yours as a standing roll-on item of interest. Does anyone else have any other items of interest to raise? Robert?
Just really for the benefit of the new members, that I have to declare an interest in that I'm trustee of a charity receiving funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Okay. Manjula, now Robert said that, I think it'd be best if you could say why you declare an interest today for the benefit of the new members, and then we'll roll on next meetings.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Chair for Leicester Council of Faiths and a member of Bishop's Faith Forum and Police's Community Gold Group, and I'm High Belief as well, and a patron for St. Martin's Cathedral.
Thank you, Manjuna. Okay, move on to items of business. Quarter 4 performance report, pages 9 to 30. Performance always tends to bring the questions out. It says here the author is Chris Newbold. I'm not sure who takes ownership of this paper. Over to you, Lord.
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I, on behalf of the OPCC, welcome the new members and congratulate you and Trevor on your re-election as Chair and Vice Chair of the panel. This report is going to be spoken to by the Deputy Chief Constable, Roger Bannister. I'm very grateful to Roger, who has responsibility for looking after performance for Leicestershire Constabulary. He very kindly come along this afternoon and will lead us on the papers and will answer most of the questions to it. I think it's right to say that both he and I have concerns, as I'm sure the panel will as well, about some matters relating to performance, and it's excellent that we're going to air all that this afternoon. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'm going to pass on to Roger now.
Thank you, Lord Bart. Chair, I'm really in your hands. I'm conscious the report is 20 to 21 pages long. Perhaps by way of suggestion, if I was to present it to you, not line by line, but perhaps tease out the most significant points, and hopefully in doing so address one or two questions that I anticipate you probably got, and then perhaps at the end take any questions if that would suit you, Chair. The report itself is broadly split into three main sections. Firstly, call handling, then some of the crime performance, then latterly victim satisfaction. So if I start off with the call handling section on page 10, this starts with our performance around emergency calls, so those 999 calls, which, relatively speaking, we're pretty pleased about. You can see at paragraph 6 there has been an increase over the last 2 years. We still work really, really hard at answering 39's calls as quickly as possible. And you'll see paragraph 7 and paragraphs 8 on the top of page 11. Just gives you a little bit of context around abandoned calls, i.e. those calls that have exceeded our 10-second target time for answering them. You'll see that we answer 85% of 39's calls pretty quickly, within 10 seconds, and then actually the remaining 15%, we answer those very quickly, but beyond the 10 seconds. So, relatively speaking, call handling performance around emergency calls is okay. The real pressure, and this is probably one of those areas that Lord Bart alluded to in his opening comments, the real pressure for us is around non-emergency calls. So this is typically, it's those telephone calls that members of the public make by using 101. Again, there's some details there around our abandonment rates, i.e. those calls that we don't answer this time in excess of 30 seconds, which have seen a really, really big rise. And there's a graph at the bottom of page 11, which hopefully just shows that big increase there. I've tried to share with the group sort of paragraphs 13 and 14 onwards, some of the reasons that we believe are in play around that. We recognise it's a problem. That 101 performance has been a problem for a little while now. It's something that has been of keen interest to the PCC, so much so that policy advisors working with the PCC have actually been over into the call centre to have a look at how things work over there. I don't think there has been, or there hasn't been, a sort of single particular issue that's causing some of the performance challenges there. It's a combination of a number of things, really. And you can see at paragraph 13, there's some staffing problems within the call centre. We've had a particular problem within sickness levels. It's an area where there are quite a few people working in a sort of short, in a fairly small space. So we've had a couple of times when flu and other sort of ailments have pretty much spread around people within a day or two, causing some big sickness problems. We've sadly also had some technical failures of the 101 sort of infrastructure itself. And I do notice it says the IT issues are now resolved. Sadly, since we've been to print, including as recently as this weekend, there has been a little bit of a problem whereby the lines went down again due to some technical issue that we're busily looking into. So they're the problems that we find around 101 performance. It begs the obvious question, that's okay, what are we doing about it? Are we taking it seriously? We're taking it extremely seriously, and you'll see at paragraph 14, one of the assistant chief constables is personally leading a goal group around exactly what some of the issues are and trying to put together a plan as quickly as possible to get us back on track, make sure that staffing patterns, shift patterns are as good as they need to be. Of course, one of the challenges is there that one of the busiest times for us is actually, unlike most other call centres, one of the busiest times is typically midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, when we're busily policing the nighttime economy. We're also working really hard to try and help the users of our service to use other methods as opposed to not necessarily telephoning the police, so using e-contact channels, answering questions online, and we've recently successfully launched an online crime recording facility. So that's the call handling, and in summary, it's the non-emergency calls that are the real focus for us. Pages 13 and 14 just take you through a little bit of detail on how we grade our incidents, and again, we're working hard and making some progress actually in trying to schedule appointments to suit users of the service. So if there's not a particular immediacy to somebody's call for service, so if there's there's not a suspect caught on the premises, or they're not caught in traffic, for example, if it's more convenient to them to come at a suitable time, we're working hard to try and do that, and some of the metrics around that are improving. Pages 14 and 15, still sticking with the sort of call handling piece, show you our response times for emergency response on page 14 and priority response on page 15. Been a subject of quite a lot of debate over the years as to whether or not there should be a target. There isn't actually a specific target, but there is an expectation or an attempt, an aspiration to try and deal with emergency incidents within 15 minutes, which you can see we pretty much are meeting across the board in those different types as set out on the middle of page 14. Priority incidents over on page 15. In Previously, we had a sort of an aspiration of around a 60-minute target time, which again we try and sort of keep in mind to judge where we are in relation to that. And you'll see that in some of those categories we're under, in some of them we're over those categories. The bit that we try really hard, because of its impact on traffic and people's safety, is to getting to people involved in road-related incidents, so typically crashes on the county's roads, as quickly as possible. Being very honest with you, paragraphs 29 and paragraphs 30 at the bottom of page 15, there has been a bit of a delay in rolling out some of our mobile data and some of the IT that we hope and intend that officers will use more when they're out and about on patrol, as opposed to having to necessarily come back to the station to do various bits of work. There was a little bit of delay in getting that kit out to officers, which we've now successfully done. The kit's out there and we're getting some good feedback, and that will hopefully prevent the need for officers to keep returning to police stations. So that was the call handling, a summary of the call handling performance. Excuse me. Page 16 onwards details to you those areas around crime and recorded crime performance. Commentary at paragraph 32 that nearly all forces nationally have reported increased levels of overall crime during the period up to February this year. And then it details those areas where we too have seen increases in crime, typically theft of motor vehicle, domestic violence with injury, and shoplifting, sexual offences, etc., as at paragraph 33. It is probably necessary to point out, and again I think we've discussed this issue here, that of course some areas where there has been an increase in crime is regarded as positive. Those areas of underreporting, we believe, particularly around domestic violence, hate crime, and some sexual offences. Encouraging people to report that so we can deal with the really serious criminality properly and thoroughly is really important to us. And it's also just worth noting that there has been a slight change in some of the methodology, and touched on at paragraph 34, whereby we're now, due to some changes in Home Office counting rules, we're now obliged to record malicious communications, which equate to about 2%, or actually 1,300 offences. And malicious communications are those offences whereby somebody's either been abusive or threatening online, or well, typically online, or secondly, they've shared indecent photographs, and that's actually a hugely growing area. You've probably heard it referred to as sexting, and that is sadly a hugely, as I say, a huge growth area. I know the panel have previously been very interested in hate crimes. At paragraph 36, we touch on there that hate crime levels have again increased slightly following a previously reducing trend, which is seen as a positive. Moving over to page 17, we've spoken previously about those crimes which are classified as crimes against society. And crimes against society are those offences whereby they're generally consistent with the amount of proactive policing activity. So if we do lots and lots of drugs warrants, if we do a particular sort of stop and search campaign, or something like Operation Fall, which we've done in Leicester city centre, we actually, by doing that and being quite successful, we generate the recording of more crimes, which is a positive. Moving on to user satisfaction. User satisfaction is sort of measured in a number of ways. Firstly, there's a measure across the board itself, and then it's broken down into various types of crime. So starting off with all user satisfaction remains quite high at 77%, but it has declined, and there's just some detail there of actually what makes up that definition of user satisfaction. Vehicle crime's been a particular problem to us, and that's probably in part around some of the way we now attend, or unless there's specific evidence, we don't attend to a report of a vehicle-related crime, and some of the satisfaction that may be influenced by some of that. The work that we've done around understanding victim satisfaction tells us that the key bit in it all, the biggest way that we can influence it, is the way that we keep people informed. I won't trouble you with how it's all sort of put together, but one of the three areas which goes to making up that definition is how well we keep people informed. And being honest, that is an area whereby we do need to get better. We need to put in a bit of rigour and a bit of a better process around how we do that and the mechanism for doing it. And again, that bit of work is very, very much underway. Moving on, I'm just conscious of the time. Moving on to page 20 and then into 21. That really hugely important offence type around rape. And you can see some of the fluctuations that we've seen around the reporting of rape. It's fair to say that it's pretty much increasing year on year as people step forward and have that confidence to report to us those offences. Paragraph 58, the positive outcome rate appears to be low at 15%, and just by way of a very brief explanation, the positive outcome rate is broadly those offences that we detect, whereby the perpetrator is identified and there has been some kind of outcome, typically a criminal justice outcome. A really key area for us, I've seen a really, really big change with both the police, CPS, trial judges, the judiciary as a whole in terms of how we deal with rape, and I suspect members may want to raise a question or two around that, perhaps. Many of the sort of details and the graphs following just really support some of the commentary that's previously been made within the report, and some of which I've already touched on. Probably fast forwarding to page 25, if I may. There's just two things there, I think, just to tease out. Paragraph 75 just talks about those offences that we and are known as taken into consideration. It's something that's been around many, many years, and it's whereby if a person is charged with one or two or a small number of offences, they do have the ability to admit a whole load of other offences, sometimes 100 or 200, unbelievably, and those are taken into consideration by the courts. For various reasons, that happens very, very little these days, for reasons not necessarily within my control, and we see very, very few offences actually now taken into consideration. Paragraph 76 talks about the satisfaction level for the crime type of burglary, which, despite it reducing, unfortunately, still stands at around 82%. And you'll see on the chart at the top of page 25, 6 years ago in April 2011, it was around 92%. So it's still high, but it has dropped to 82%. And then very finally, on page 28, HMIC, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, are currently conducting a data quality and crime recording integrity thematic inspection in the force. They're doing every force nationally over I think a 2-year period. They're with us now. And then very finally, paragraphs 93, 94 and 95 is just a little bit of context there to perhaps help your understanding of how we measure performance in the force. So monthly, there's what we call a tasking and coordination group meeting, where all the senior leads come together, chaired by an assistant chief constable, to decide on the priorities for the next 4 weeks. We're going to introduce a slight variation of a performance group, again held monthly, again chaired by an assistant chief constable. And then finally, every month I chair a meeting which includes performance around finance, HR, sickness, some of the support we get from regional collaborations. And whilst I chair that, the PCC, Lord Bark and colleagues join me pretty much every month. Chair, that was a bit of a whistle-stop. It probably didn't feel a whistle-stop tour, but that was a whistle-stop tour of the paper. A huge amount of sort of different subject matters, and hopefully I've been able to answer 1 or 2 questions, or anticipating 1 or 2 questions, but please, happy to take any more.
Thanks, Roger. Lord Bark, have you got anything to say at this point?
No, nothing at this stage. Obviously, some of if there are questions and comments to made, maybe I'll come in. I'd like to thank Roger for the way in which he's described this really quite long but quite significant report.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Bark. We've got 3 questioners lining up already, but before we go into questioners, I'd just like to... This is for panel members, by the way, not so much Lord Bark and his team. I'm sure you've all noted that HMIEC intend to return during 2017 to review progress of the force. Progress made in the police improvement plan and how this has been monitored by the OPCC may be an issue for the panel. And obviously, we will come back to that at the appropriate time, but I think it's just wise to highlight at this moment in time. What I'm going to do, members, is with your permission, I'm going to take it. There's no questions on section 1, purpose of the report, no questions on scope of the report, and no questions on the background. It looks like there isn't. I'm going to go straight into each section as it is. So if you could keep to those sections, that would be good. So the first section is clearly on page 10. That's at the top of the page, call handling. John.
Thank you, Chair. The problem is, I don't particularly want... I have one question on one particular section, but generally I have 2 other issues which are actually global rather than specific. Shall I ask them now? Or is that what... Yes, thank you. No, I'm in a crisis. Rather prosaic. Could the charts be labelled on the left, please? You actually took a while to work out. Some of them are in minutes, some of them are in percentages, some of them are actually numbers, but you do actually need to work it out. So that's straightforward. Putting it simply, there's an awful lot of information here. Most of it, I would argue, is operational. So the real question is actually the PCC. Are you satisfied with the system that's in front of us, and what are you doing about ensuring we achieve the appropriate outcomes?
Chair, with your permission, I'll try and answer John's very good and general question. No, I'm not satisfied, and you wouldn't expect me to be, but nor do I think senior police officers are satisfied entirely with how things are at the present time. I mean, there's always room for improvement, and there clearly is and there clearly is here. I take, as the Deputy Chief Constable said, take a very live interest in this whole issue of performance. You would expect a Police and Crime Commissioner to do that. I now, as a matter of course, attend the monthly meeting, the performance meeting, which is chaired by Roger Bannister, and I take quite a leading role in asking questions that are affecting me and the office. I've been concerned about, for example, 101 ever since I took the job, but that concern is absolutely mirrored by the police themselves, and that is why a lot of work is going on into 101 at the moment. Maybe some quite radical stuff will happen in due course, but for the moment there was clearly a time earlier this year when a whole combination of circumstances meant that a system that wasn't ideal wasn't working particularly well. Now, I do know that a lot of effort is going on from Roger, from the Assistant Chief Constable, Rob Nixon, and others in order to, and a new team, I think it's fair to say, who are now in charge of 101 to make sure that crucial system, because it's the real interface between the public and the police, is improved. But these things take a lot of time. I'm keeping a very close interest indeed about what's happening to 101. You heard from Roger that my policy advisor went and spent a day at 101, was actually quite impressed. This is a person with quite a lot of management experience, was actually quite impressed by the way in which the job was being done. But there's clearly lots more to happen. So, yes, the answer to your question shortly is that my office takes a huge interest in reports like this. It's absolutely fundamental, as I think your question indicates, to why we're here at all. And that is to make sure that performance is improved over a period of time. I mean, forgive me for sounding like a sort of repeat record. The truth is, you have to put this in the context, too, of less funding over a whole number of years. And that is relevant to the way in which a police force can perform when it's a police force in a growing population with a lot of new issues that are arising month after month. So, yes, you can be assured that I personally, Kirk too, and the office is talked a great deal to the senior police officers about this.
No supplementary, John.
No, I think the point is noted, and actually that Lord Back's answer is the one we come back to, rather than, because it's not our role to hold the police to account, it's our role to hold Lord Back to account.
Thank you very much, John. Ruth.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as a newcomer to this committee, I'm afraid I had difficulty on pages 16 and 17. And the diagrams, I could make neither head nor tail of them. I mean, you know, spots and 50 Shades of Grey don't really do anything positive, and I'd like these to be clarified, please, Chairman, because they just don't mean a thing to me. I mean, I've read the papers carefully, but it's the diagrams that I can't work out.
Yeah, your point is noted, and we'll see to address that matter for the next meeting. Thank you very much. We'll see if we can. I have David next. Oh, sorry, Abdul. Sorry, I had no idea.
I think I would agree with the member in relation to these diagrams. I mean, when I first read them, I thought I was reading something electrical. I think it might be useful to actually have pie charts instead. I mean, I might be orthodox or conventional, but I think it might make sense to me where the ball is up or down and what the square means and everything else. It's just something else.
Robert?
Just to add to the same topic, we were very kindly find on our table some coloured versions of these graphs. There are others which, without the colours, are completely meaningless and very hard to understand.
I've just been informed by you, and they're all online in colours, actually. But even so, we'll take your concerns back, and we'll try to address them with the OPCC for the next meeting. Thank you.
I think this is actually, perhaps I'm being too forward, I think this is quite a substantial criticism, which I think has some justification. And I think one of the things that should be looking at, and I know it is being looked at, is whether these important graphs, they are very important, whether there's a way of improving them and making them easier to understand. I think after quite a few months now in the job, I begin to understand why the red spot is really important. It's the clue to it is where the red spot is. But I think there may be a better way of doing it. Now, I'm certainly not a statistician or an analyst, but I know it's something that Roger and his team have taken on board. Is that fair?
Well, as I said, Lord Bark, Ewan will be in touch with the OPCC to look to ways to improve this for the next meeting. Thank you. David.
Thank you, Chairman. The bane of many organisations' existence, and cited here also in paragraph 13 as one of the reasons for the huge increase in abandonment rates, is sickness levels. Does the OPC, or indeed Roger himself, have any target levels for sickness levels, and what are the actual sickness days, so that we can get a feeling of the efficiency or reduced efficiency due to sickness?
Roger, I think.
Yes, in answer to the question, we do have a whole load of detail around target levels, actual levels. We look at it monthly in the performance delivery group, which I chair with the PCC present. It gives us a breakdown department by department, whether it's police officer, members of police staff, a whole load of different metrics, and that's how we've been able to pick up on at quite an early stage, actually, that the sickness levels within the centre were really, really challenging for some of those reasons I touched on. But certainly all that information is available. Probably the only bit I've not mentioned that is worthy of mention, we work very closely with staff associations and trade unions, most usually Unison, around putting together some plans and just trying to bring those levels back up to where we need them to be. A whole load of work around shift patterns. That work is very much underway and is hopefully going to get better for later in the summer.
I've just got a couple of questions myself now. It's strange, point 23. It's a very short sentence there, as you all know. But it is obviously to do with response times, and the report indicates that it's reasonably good news at point 23. However, my reading of the chart is that response times appears to be rising for emergency incidents. Obviously, the police have put a lot in store on Operation Edison, which is linked to altering police resources into response times. So, has that had any effect on the response times from the police perspective?
Chair, I think the short answer is yes, we believe it has, and your analysis of all our red dots is absolutely spot on. So in mid-2014, for example, the response times, these are emergency response times, were about 7 or 8 minutes. It's now about 14 or 15 minutes, and that's for getting anywhere within the force area. We think that the new operating model has had some effect because officers are now based in sort of different locations. It's not the only reason. So if you were to ask kind of, what else do you think is behind that? Inevitably, a reduction in officers themselves has an impact. I think there's something around the use we make of our regional colleagues and some of those functions across the force, particularly around traffic policing. The deployment of officers to armed incidents is provided from within the East Midlands forces. So I think a combination of all those things, probably also sort of slightly increased traffic volumes over 3 or 4 years. I think putting all those things together has led to that slight increase.
Thanks for that, Roger. So you say the average response 7 to 14 minutes.
Yeah, looking at the graph, it's currently and the table beneath it currently is around 14 minutes for antisocial behaviour, 14 minutes for crime, 15 minutes for public safety, 15 minutes for sort of road related. So the average of that, the average of those 2,296 arrivals to emergency incidents, all those were done in an average response time of 15 minutes, 3 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Sir Roger. And just whilst I got the floor, in relation to overall crime, I understand the police are reviewing the level of crime, knife crime, related crime, with young people. I think I've read it all, but I can't see any great reference to this at all. Am I wrong or right on this? Because it is one of great public interest, the rise in knife crime, which I believe Leicestershire has, percentage-wise, at least had quite a rise in, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, we've sadly, Chair, since probably the paper went to print in the last few weeks, have seen, particularly in the last 7 days, seen a number of very sad incidents where people have lost their lives in the across the force area. A number of those, not all, but a number of those are as a result of injuries from knives or other bladed weapons. There is a huge amount of work going on by the force, together with a number of partners, including people actually within this room. We're doing a lot of prevention work and early interventions work with schools. We've set up a multi-agency senior officer-led response specifically to knife crime. We've got a campaign called Lives, Not Knives, which hopefully members will have seen. And finally, we're working very closely with, and I'm really grateful for the support actually, because it must be terribly difficult, but we're working really, really closely with the families of knife crime victims, and it's really impactful, powerful stuff. And grateful to Lord Barker, who I know has been central to some of that. But we really, really want to try and get ahead as best we can around the prevention message.
I wonder if I could just support what Deputy Chief Constable has just said. This has been, I think, if any one subject has been discussed more than any other, it's been this issue of knife crime in the course of the last couple of months, last month or so. Well, it's one thing to discuss it, it's quite another thing to do something about it. I wonder if I could, and this may be being much too forward, Chair, suggest that the panel might like to consider for a future meeting a paper on knife crime, which would then bring you up to date with what the position is in Leicestershire. We've got to look at it comparatively. Anyone who looks at their papers will see, for example, that the Metropolitan, that London at the moment is going through a very difficult, much more difficult issue than even we are. But it is a crucial issue for the relationship between the public and the police. You must remember that a lot of knife crime is not what really frightens people the most, which is teenage youngsters on teenage youngsters. Quite a lot of it is domestic violence, very, very serious matters indeed, but it's kitchen knives being used within the house. There's a whole number of distinctions that have got to be made between one type of knife crime and the other. But at the end of the day, it is something that is of real concern to people, and I suspect to your panel too, Chair, and very much to us. And a whole number of our matters are being discussed at the moment between the police and the OPCC, see what help we can give. I think the real message, though, about knife crime is that it can't just be left to the police. This is a matter for society. It's a matter for parents, for siblings, for friends. And unless they play their part too, the police can't succeed. But there's a real issue. We don't want to over-dramatise it in terms of Leicester or Leicestershire. There is an increase, and alas, some of them have been more serious than others. But we really don't want there to be a kind of moral panic about this, because there's no need to be. And I'm satisfied as PCC that the police are on top of this issue.
The reason I raised it was simply the level of public concern in knife crime in Leicestershire. I was going to ask you to bring a paper on what the PCC is doing about this. That's what we would like, and I'm sure all panel members would support that. So thank you for the offer. However, it would have been nice, and I do accept this paper was probably printed way before I picked up the great concern there is in the community. But having said that, given it is on the rise, quite steeply as well, and a concern expressed by many people, it would have been nice to have seen a section on it. But however, it wasn't, but you're going to bring a paper forward and we accept that. I have Ratalal on knife crime, and then Helen on knife crime as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of the point I was going to raise, Rogers and Lord Barker has already answered, but I'd like to take a step further. I would ask Roger if we can have a key stakeholder meeting in respective wards of city or county, respectively, and tackle the crime. I know it's not just a police matter, it involves us, local community, local schools and everything. And I'm grateful that for you as a police are going around the school and making awareness, but I think we need to do far, far greater. What I heard last night, because things are happening in my area, and it is a worry situation. And at the moment, the body language state, retaliation. Now, if that comes into the equation, I think it's a serious agenda. That how do we tackle the problem? So we need to get our heads together and work around those areas that we can tackle now rather than later.
Yeah, totally agree and support some of your thinking that the stakeholder meeting, I certainly think there is something in that, and that's something that we're working on as we speak, actually. And the work in schools. I mean, I went personally to a school on patrol in your area last week with one of the local officers distributing some of our Lives Not Knives campaign material. We need to do more of that. We will do more of that, but as Lord Bart says, in conjunction with others.
Ratalal, I do accept your suggestion there, but I think it's important that we have Lord Bark's report first, whenever the next meeting is, and then we see how it develops from there. Obviously, the police are talking to other partners on this. It is a massive, massive issue, as we're all aware. But if we have Lord Bark's report first, and then we'll see where the panel goes from there.
Totally agree with you, Chair. I'm not disputing whatsoever. I agree with the report should be first and then action. Right.
Thank you. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. For those that don't know, I used to be one of the 5 national knife crime advisors for the Home Secretary in the Home Office back in the Tackling Knives Action Programme. So you do have somebody in the room who actually has got a background in this, and I am more than willing to do what I can. It was a different government at that time, but certainly from the experience that we had, a lot of what was produced, unfortunately, was archived, but there's a lot of information there. The national knife crime work that we did around the guide. Interested to hear about the fact that we've obviously got a lot of links with schools. It's very important. Obviously, I'm assuming, are you talking colleges as well as a part of my question? But in terms of other partners, what other partners are we engaging with? Are you engaging with in terms of working to tackle this particular issue? In terms of influence of young people, particularly, are we looking at how we can work with people like the local football teams and the rugby team and others that can have that influence? Working with victims of knife crime who are still with us. Have we got any way of working where we can have that discussion with young people about it's not clever, it's not safe, look what happened to me. The fact that you can be more of a victim of knife crime by carrying a knife. Your own knife is likely to be used against you. And all those different things. I'm just really interested to see what's happening in terms of the partners. Retailers, I was responsible for bringing all the retailers into the Home Office to actually speak to us about how they were going to look at the sale of knives to underage people. You only have to look around the streets, certainly in Loughborough, when I've walked through some of the knives that are accessible and available for young people, and whether or not that's being rigidly tested through test purchasing. All these different things that I wonder whether or not actually were shelved and have been forgotten that actually could be quite effective ways of dealing with some of these issues. Because supply of some of these knives, the types of knives being used, we've heard of things like knife amnesties, and I won't go there, my thoughts on that one. But certainly there are a number of things that need to be addressed, and I'd be very interested to know what partners are you working with and which ones have you highlighted as being perhaps that you need to look at, and I've given a few hints just there.
Roger, if you're going to answer the question on Lawbuck, I'm not sure, but if you could keep your answer to that specific last question, because obviously everything else will come out in your report at the next meeting.
I mean, the stakes are so high here, the very worst thing we could do is assume we sort of know it all and we've got it all boxed off. You really, really helpfully mentioned a couple of things there, and I won't say sort of openly the ones that I think we need to go away and have a look at. But just by means of some assurance, for the most part, lots of things there are being worked on. So the work with sporting organisations, I'll leave it as wide as that, is very definitely being looked at. High-profile sports people, again, kind of watch this space. There's some really good, exciting stuff coming out. In terms of which organisations we're working with, local authorities, some of the third sector, the schools, colleges, Leicester College. But you make a really good point as well about the retailers and possibly the test purchasing bit, which I think is one of the things we need to go and have a look at.
Any supplementary, Helen? No. Okay, thanks. Okay, well, believe we're going back to the original list of questioners, which takes us to Malise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's on page 16, number 34. When one has been doing this thing for a bit, you hear the same excuses. And this one saying about reporting is made easier is the reason why the crime has risen. I just want to know what evidence you've got for that. It's a very easy argument to make, but unless you're monitoring it, and to an extent, it could just be that the crime is rising and the reporting is just part of it.
I'm going to let Roger do the expert bit on this, but that may be true, the opposite may be true. It's impossible to know. Sometimes I think both crimes are rising and there's more reporting. Sometimes it can be crimes are not rising, but there's just more reporting. Undoubtedly in the field of domestic violence, for example, it just seems to me that over the last number of years, thank goodness, at long last, it's been taken seriously by society, and that means the police, it means the community as well, that it's hard to think that there hasn't been a good deal more reporting which wouldn't have taken place before that change in society's view about it. But how can I possibly say? All we know about domestic violence is that it is very frequent. It's a crime that occurs a great deal and is still very underreported. But you're right to point out that we can't always justify a rise in crime by saying it's just being reported more. But don't go too far that way. There may well be something in reporting. Hate crime, you see, for example, is really difficult. A hate crime. Have there been more hate crimes? Yes, probably there have been during the course of the last year. Has there been more reporting of hate crimes? Yes, probably too, but in my view, not nearly enough, actually. So it's one of those conundrums. But I start from the premise, and I think I said this the very first time I ever came before the panel, Chair, was that I have very little faith in figures around crime levels. Very little faith indeed about them. These are reported crimes. We know that a lot of crime is not reported. So I think governments of all complexions, councils of all complexions, always want to say at the end of their term that there's been less crime than there was at the start. I think you ought to take that with an ocean full of salt, actually. I pass on to Roger, who will no doubt tell you some of the expert view.
Well, I would certainly support everything Lord Barker said. I mean, there is some anecdotal evidence from victims of crime, particularly those who do report domestic violence and serious sexual violence, that the means by which they can do it is far, far easier than it was certainly when I joined 29 years ago. So for example, now we have independent domestic violence advisors. We have many more independent advisors and supporters and counsellors around allegations of sex crime, hate crime, for instance. Many years ago there was the True Vision project where people are able to report crime to a third party. They don't necessarily just have to knock on the police station door. And some of the feedback we do get from victims is that actually it's kind of surprisingly easy compared to how it used to be. Please, I would hate, wouldn't want anybody to think that that's we sort of attribute the rise solely down to those. Of course, that's not the case. But certainly, my professional experience is that it is easier for people to report crime, which is all we want them to do, so that we can investigate it, pick up on serial perpetrators, and kind of hopefully prevent more victims.
I'll just make a small comment. Certainly, in my perspective as community safety, what was at the county council is building up the confidence of any victim to come forward that their complaint will be taken seriously. And over my short tenure, I can comfortably say the police and many other partners have improved the way that, like you've already indicated, with independent advisors supporting those victims. Sadly, Lord Bark, there's still more people to come forward, but at least we do have the complaints on the rise, which has to be a good news story. Right, back to this, Ratilal.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. One is on sickness level again. What are the percentage in order to cover the work if individual people go sick, day sick, long-term sick, or anything like that? Because sickness level affect our performance. So I'm sure that you must have some strategy in order to cover the work, irrespective of whatever the shift pattern is, early, late, afternoon, whatever it is. Yeah. And the second question is about the time scale. Looking at the graphic, between April 2014 and 15, the level was half of the time what we're suggesting now, and increasing now to 15 minutes. The old days it was about 8 or 9 minutes in response to emergency calls, anything like that. What are we doing as Lord Bark? What are you doing, Lord Bark, in order to cover such a shortfall of manpower resources in order to assist the police in that respect? Because that is a worry situation for us on that level. Because if people are gone sick, then there is covers to be covered.
On the sickness figures, I'll pass on to Roger, but I'll come back to you on what we're doing.
I may have to come back to the panel with greater level of detail around the sort of precise figures, but the main one that springs to mind that is probably of most interest for people to know is that in most circumstances, unless there are exceptional reasons, members of personnel after 6 months sickness go on to half pay. Which is a widely understood. It's fairly controversial, but broadly speaking, it's taxpayers' money. We need people in the workplace. It's not a crudely applied sort of determination. There are various things taken into account, but generally speaking, after 6 months, there is a half pay implemented.
On the broader question that you asked, your second question. You have been tired of hearing me bang on about how I believe the police force here and elsewhere, as it happens, are underfunded. That shows itself in the level of staff and the level of police officers and the level of backup that there is. The police have really difficult decisions to make about how to use the money that I give them. I don't mean that in a kind of boastful way, but it's my job to provide them with the money they spend. They have to make some really impossible decisions sometimes about how to spend that money in terms of staff and police officers. The best I can do, I think, at the moment is to go on banging away to try and persuade whichever government's in power that actually police cuts have gone on for long enough and there needs to be some kind of change in strategy, because otherwise we're going to find police forces that are spending all their time just worrying about how to keep their heads above water, and causes the kind of issue, in part, that we've been discussing in terms of staffing.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, no, just a final question I forgot to ask. Although, the graphic and everything is very well, but these graphic figures and everything is there is Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Can we have some breakdown next time through you, Chair, about city and the county breakdown in that sense? The level of crime and everything else, because then we can work towards that objective to help the police in that sense.
I think that's a yes, Ratanel. Again, you will liaise with the OPCC. Yep. Okay. Helen, also on sickness.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this it's really hard, isn't it, because we go straight into operational territory, and I'm very conscious of that. So bringing it back to yourself, Lord Bach, I mean, we've talked about Operation Edison. It's been in place for some time. We've seen an impact in terms of what's happening with the emergency call-outs and obviously the impact there in terms of the delay. And so the question for me is, are you assured enough is being done to actually make sure people are in the right place at the right time? And in terms of some of these stats that we've got regarding the sickness levels, how's that been looked at in terms of, because the intimation's just been made, if somebody's got flu or a cold, they're not off for 6 months. So clearly there's maybe some other factors that people may be off, and I would imagine it's quite a high stressful environment for people as well, in terms of what are the causes of people's illness, and do we have an issue regarding the sickness levels being apportioned in some way to the way that the Operation Edison and the impact of things are having on staff at the front line?
Draw a distinction between Edison and the 101, for example. I think Edison was, in a way, forced on the police by the lack of resource, by the need to cut back the number of officers that could be in neighbourhoods and on the beat. And I think there was always going to be a price to pay for Edison. I wouldn't go back to the old system. I think it would be a completely impossible thing to do, given the funding there is at the present time. And I think there have been advantages in moving forward with Edison, but that there are bits and bobs of it that need changing and looking at. I'm quite sure the senior chief officers are really very conscious of all the time. One of the reasons why I pushed hard to get 8 new beat officers was because I thought there was a lack of beat officers under Edison as it had worked itself out. One of the problems is that there are very large areas of the county where crime isn't very great in terms of numbers, but it will take quite a long time to get from point A to point B, depending where the police are at any particular stage. As to 101, I think it is a difficult job. I think those who answer these calls are under a lot of pressure jobs, but I think these are ones of particular difficulty. I do know from talking to Roger and to Superintendent Batchelor, Lucy Batchelor, who's now in charge of 101, that she is looking at the human resources side of those who work in 101 in a number of different ways, and hopefully that will cut down the sickness level there. I don't know if Roger would like to add to anything I've said.
I think the only thing I would add very briefly, couple of points. Broadly, across the force area, sickness levels for both police officers and police staff, so this is across the board, not necessarily just in the control room, are amongst some of the lowest in our most similar forces and indeed nationally, and that may be something that could or should be part perhaps of the next report. And then secondly, members may be aware or have heard a reference to something called Darwin within some of the force work, and that's the evolution of the Edison model, improving it, changing some of it, resourcing patterns, shift patterns, where officers are based, and some of that is going or hoping to go live in around September of this year.
Thank you very much, Roger. John.
Thank you. Sorry, pages 14 and 15, if I may. Forget the graph, it's the two little boxes. I would suggest on page 14 that actually that's success. You've targeted 15 minutes, and that's fairly balanced, and that's fine. However, on 15, I would say that's the opposite, in that there are actually quite a wide variety. And if you were looking in from the outside, public safety at 50% over target, I suspect the label public safety covers an enormous amount of things. However, either a single target on that isn't helpful, or there's something not right. But clearly, you're never going to reduce the 1 hour 29 minutes, bearing in mind it's also significantly the highest number of actual incidents. So that there's something, you're not being terribly helpful to yourself there, and at the same time, I'm not quite sure I understand what it's telling me.
I think you're about right, actually. The performance around emergency incidents is good. You know, when you consider the size of the force area, 15 minutes is not very long, even with blue lights and two-tones and far better driving than mine and all that sort of thing. Priority incidents, you're absolutely right. That classification of public safety covers a whole load of very random, very, very diverse things. And actually, just to be really clear, the 60 minutes is, strictly speaking, isn't a target. It used to be some time ago, but hasn't been for some time. But we do still use it just as a bit of a reference point, just to check how we are doing. But yeah, I certainly take the point that, you know, the public safety category, which is huge, presents the biggest challenge. And it is, you know, we like to challenge ourselves, and we are probably making it slightly difficult for ourselves.
I agree with Roger. I'd go a little bit further. I'd say it's almost meaningless, that thing. I think that was your point, really, John. I think it's meaningless to have a figure like 1776 and then it doesn't tell you really anything at all, except that it's unsatisfactory. And I think this is kind of some of the work that's being done already in terms of the stats.
Manjula.
Chair, as we discuss in the response time, I can. You know, on 101, it was 15 minutes time, but I would like to have a breakdown because especially Leicester is a home to different diverse communities. English is not their first language. Because many times they are told that sometimes they can't find somebody interpreter straight away, so they have to go around finding somebody who can speak their language, and that doesn't help them. On Saturday in St. Matthew's, first time ever, women from African Caribbean community, in a church, they hosted a conference on domestic violence. And thus, from CPS, Sonia Chakrabarti, she came, she's one of the speakers. So obviously, now the faith communities, they want to do something on domestic violence because it's a serious crime. Again and again it was said, it is sometimes when we ring because they are panicking, they are in, obviously, their safety. They said it takes longer. Your officers were there as well, the calls. So I would like to have breakdown that with people with different languages, do they get the same time response or do they have to wait longer?
I think in practice, I think there may be something, some truth in what you suggest, and I think it's probably something that I would be happy to bring back through the OPCC to give you a proper, fuller answer.
I think that's. If I could just interject there, Roger, I think that's by far the best way, isn't it, to come back with a formal answer? Would you be happy at that, Manjula? I was sure you are.
Thank you, because CPS, when she gave her talk, that police refers to CPS, then they decide. So many women, they were more concerned and anxious. That means it's because they didn't know that how the system works. So this would be helpful to have this something so that I can take it back to women of different communities.
A formal answer through OPCC. Robert.
Thank you, Chair. This is really going to be a question for you rather than the Police and Crime Commissioner. But Lord Barker mentioned police manning not very long ago and police numbers. As I understand it, the ratio of policemen per head of population has risen from 430 about 5 years ago to some 590 now, which is a 25% increase, or should I say decrease, in the number of policemen per head of population. And this is clearly must be a source for concern when we're dealing with figures like this. Lord Barker said that he is doing what he can to highlight this problem to the government of the day. And while we can't do anything probably until after the 8th of June, what I would ask, is there any procedure by which we, the panel, can express our concern about police numbers?
At the last panel meeting, Robert, it was all agreed that we sent a letter to the Home Secretary, I believe, wasn't it? Which has gone. So if you want, it has gone, yeah. So if you want a copy of that, if I could charge you and... yeah. If you and we'll send you a copy anyway. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, it falls to me, last question.
Chair, could I,
sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. Colonel Martin said 5 years ago, it was actually 2006 is the 430 figure, now 599, near 600 effectively, which is a loss of 547 police officers, 23%. But thank you for making the point.
I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting, so that's why I clearly didn't read the minutes of the previous one, sorry.
No problem at all, Robert. Final question on the first section of the performance report. Just remind you, we are only on the first section. It's just a question for me, it's quite an interesting one, I believe. In relation to the satisfaction levels, there's a general fall across all areas. I think that's a fair comment. Very little explanation as given to the reasons. Now, I've got to note that burglaries, satisfaction is declining, and a burglary is a crime that attracts a lot of contact with the police service with follow-up details, visits, scenes of crime, officers, police officers, PCSOs. Therefore, the reasons to this satisfaction fall would be of interest. Also have to note that ASB satisfaction is falling, which could be for a whole host of reasons, we know that. But again, a more detailed explanation would be of interest.
Chair, if I can try and help, I think, it's probably no single thing. It's a complex area. I think it's a combination of probably three key things. You probably remember me saying the biggest bit of it that's measured that we're probably not doing well enough is the keeping people informed. There are three different bits we look at. It's the keeping victims and people informed. Secondly, I think, again, it's coming back to that reduction in the number of officers. Probably means they spend less time at particular scenes of burglary or dealing with incidents of antisocial behaviour. It's probably not an unrealistic thing to say that because there are less officers, they get deployed quicker or more quickly from job to job. And again, there may be something that victims of crime are having to wait longer for officer attendance. So I think a combination of those things has probably contributed to that drop in satisfaction.
And I'm sure you're working on this because, as we said, level of satisfaction is certainly key to encouraging people to come forward to report crime. Members, I think that's enough on the first paragraph of performance, being the first section. So we move on to page 19. I'm still going to keep to an order, although we have hopped around a bit. Supporting victims and witnesses. Any questions? Page 20, to increase reporting of serious sexual offences and ensure a positive outcome for victims and witnesses of serious sexual offences. Helen?
Just a quick one. Looking at the figures just there when you've got the recorded crime rape offences, I just had a little look at some of the seasonal stuff. I noticed that certainly since October, it was September actually, 2014, and then the same around September 2016, there's quite a spike in those two areas. I know it's not significant. I just wondered, is this anything to do with potentially around universities, new startups and things like that? Is there anything linked to... that's the only thing I could think of around that time, is that you've got university starting and perhaps Freshers' Week, etc., people maybe who have had too much to drink, etc. I just wondered if there's anything linked to that.
I think it's probably more than one thing, but again, I do think it is some of exactly what you've just said. The whole Freshers' Week. I mean, we do loads of prevention work with universities and other education establishments around sort of dangers of online, excessive drinking, etc., etc. But I do think some of it is undoubtedly down to that, and certainly allegations do increase that time of year.
Chair, could I just say perhaps maybe then for the PCC's office that would be an interesting one to look at, because again, I know a lot of work does happen with Freshers' Weeks with the police, but in terms of raising that, because we've got September coming up, we've got a bit of time here, so let's see if we can buck the trend this year.
I agree, and we will. But I think this is also an issue for community safety panels as well, who are very well represented here. We have the city here, and of course, if David won't mind me saying so, Charnwood too, with its great university at Loughborough. So I think we could all do some work on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Helen. Over to page 21, to increase reporting of hate crimes and ensure a positive outcome for victims and witnesses of hate crime offences. Page 22. Oh, sorry, Manjula.
The opening sentence on paragraph 59 says that recording increased markedly during 2016. But back on 36, you have said that there has been increase in the levels of hate crime. And obviously this is causing concern. Not that many people still don't report hate crime. And now during elections, even there are some incidents which have come up when people, they go out and they have been called names. Are you illegal? What are you doing? So these sort of things people don't report, but to them then they get very worried and concerned about their safety and safeguarding. I think on for this one, with the police, we have to do more of bringing awareness to people that they can report it in confidently, because everything will be in confidence. Sometimes they think the repercussions, if we report, police asks us who has said that, and they don't want to report that. I know it is a social issue which all the communities have to work together. Even on Gold Community meeting, this was raised when the knife crime came, the multi-agency sport. One thing was very helpful, the youth parliament members sitting there, how the young people, it was quite encouraging to find out from that how people can report and how we can report that. But hate crime, as I said, it is still a big issue because of the different new communities coming. So if we I know this is not police officers only. If as a community we can work together something. So if local policing can get more engaged with the local communities to give them confidence that if they report, everything will be confidential. The Crime Stoppers line is quite long, so sometimes people are not even aware of Crime Stoppers. Police is the first contact, when they want to get in touch.
Comments, Lord Bart?
To respond to that.
I would just concur, and work with the Youth Commission, with the OPCC, the faith groups, and your leadership, and then the benefits of neighbourhood policing, working with communities, getting that trust and confidence is absolutely key to get that proper actual record, or the actual rate of crimes that are being committed, to get them reported and recorded.
Abdul.
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to go back whether you missed out in terms of rape offences and sexual offences. Yeah, the sexual offences area. Paragraph 58, I was a bit concerned about the paragraph 58 in relation to, I don't know how it's recorded or reported, but evidential evidence. Does there seem to be a problem in terms of taking up cases with the CPS in relation to some of these reports that are being reported? I mean, there seem to be 300, and it's a very... You're saying that the ratio does appear to be low at 15%. My other inquiry in this area is the issue around grooming, and I know we were immune throughout the country to that, but does that categorise anywhere in this, and does that feature in this as well?
If I could answer both of those sort of in reverse order, some of those grooming offences, so if it leads to a serious sexual offence of rape or buggery, will be reflected within these figures. But if it's an offence that doesn't fall into either of those two categories, it wouldn't appear here. To answer your first question around the sort of CPS, I mean the whole approach. In fairness to the CPS and the police and the judiciary, has I've seen a seismic change over the years. The way that we deal with victims, it's probably still the most difficult offence type to deal with, because typically there are only two people. There's no eyewitnesses. There's no forensic evidence. There's no CCTV. It's hugely emotive. It's really complicated, and actually, credit to my teams, or the teams within the force, who deal with not only investigating victims of rape and serious sexual offending, but those people who investigate it. They're some of the most impressive people within the organisation. And in fairness to CPS and the lawyers, they're specially trained to prosecute sexual offending, where it's often the most nuanced aspect of the case can bring that conviction.
Okay, Ashna.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up what from Councillor Sood, she said earlier around this election campaign that is going on. It's partly about the safety, because sometimes when we do knock on the door, especially with the female, not about the male, they do get abused, and saying that. In that respect, do we have some sort of safety measure that you're just 999 call, and would that priority will take place or not, or report after the incident occurred, and what kind of action would take against those individual concerned?
We would sort of deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but if it got to the stage where candidates were experiencing, a particular level of problem in a particular locality, then clearly we would do something about that. Sort of look at the intelligence picture, try and work out kind of who's posing the problem. But it would be pretty much a sort of case by case basis.
opportunity of saying, because I was speaking to the Chief Constable about this morning, that the police are very sensitive to the fact that we're living at an election period time, and would protect all candidates of whatever party in exactly the same way. They're used to doing this past elections, and this one is no exception at all.
Lord Buck, it's not about the candidate, it's the volunteers. That's where my concerns are.
I have been one myself,
okay.
and I have been insulted. But I do think volunteers take a bit upon themselves when they go to people's houses. You know, they can't expect to be warmly greeted by everybody.
No, understandable. But it's just
but it can get over the top.
It was in the situation with Casey.
Well, the police will look at each individual case, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. John.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 21, it relates to paragraph 61, but just I get very concerned when about hate crime. It is dominated by a single issue, and I think we perhaps need to look at hate crime as two issues. One is racially related, one is actually gender, sexual orientation, all of the other issues, which actually I've no idea whether it's on the rise or on the fall, but it is because it's all lumped in together. I think you perhaps need a little more subtlety, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, there have been reports to your panel, Chair, on hate crime that have, I think, been more detailed in terms of the type of crime. We include, obviously, hate crime aimed at disabled people, LGBT, and the other categories that you mentioned.
Okay, members, thank you very much. Over to page 22, to prevent ASP and continuously improve the quality of service and response to victims of antisocial behaviour. 23, to continue to improve the quality of service and response to victims of time. At the bottom there, to reduce all crime. Page 24, to reduce domestic burglary and ensure a positive outcome for victims of burglary offences. Over the page to 26, to reduce violence against a person with injury and ensure a positive outcome for victims of violent crime with injury offences. Rattenau, have you got a question?
Yeah, just on the page 22, Chair. Sorry about the Mr. 22, yeah. I just want to, for the record purposes, Roger, from our neighbourhood team, I'm glad a lot of antisocial behaviour in my ward has been reduced quite considerably, which is, I'd like to congratulate the team on that.
Thank you very much, Rattenau. Page 27, Manjula.
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 2473, you know. I welcome that there are new categories of malicious communications and revenge porn. Chair, is human trafficking, where does that fall? Because it will be nice to have some update on human trafficking, which is a growing issue among different communities.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, it's no problem to provide that detail, share it with the OPCC at all. Modern slavery, human trafficking. We have that information. It falls outside the malicious communications bit, but through you, Chair, the OPCC, we can provide that.
Okay, through the OPCC and you, and we'll provide that. Helen, sorry, didn't miss you totally. Where are you though? Because I'm up to page 27. Where are you?
So am I. And it does skip over to 28 as well because there's a paragraph referring to it, Chair. It's paragraph 85 of 28, but it's looking at the graphs. It's obviously just starting to spike. The first graph there of theft of motor vehicle in January. Obviously, at the moment, it's not. We don't see what's happening with that trend there, but that's quite a spike, isn't it? And I just wondered, in terms of, again, trying to stay away from the operational side of things, in terms of the PCC, is there anything being done to look at these trends that we're seeing around things like theft of motor vehicle, and is this trend looking like it's continuing in the wrong direction?
This has been, in recent years, a declining offence because, obviously, a whole number of reasons, but one of which, of course, has been the modern cars are much more secure, as I understand it, than older cars. I think it's probably a bit early yet to pay special attention to this. What worries me particularly about offences of this kind is, though, for small self-employed people who have got their tools in the back of their vans or cars, who find their cars stolen or their tools stolen, it can be either, and then they're out of business for a very long time, if not forever. That's something that's concerned me, and I've made representations about it, and I know senior police officers are very concerned about that as well.
Chair, if I may come back. In terms of, certainly from some research I've been doing regarding theft of motor vehicles, I know there's been quite a spike, and I've seen some actually, even on sort of Facebook pages with Leicestershire Police and others, of quite modern cars that are being stolen because people are able to now clone and have found a way to actually access, I think in Audis in particular have been an issue. And so there's a different tactic and there's a different way forward, and that's why I raise this, because actually I think there's something that we're seeing that's a new type of issue with newer vehicles, and in terms of how to design that out. I did a lot of work when I was at the Home Office with that team, designing out crime and doing all sorts to sat-navs and you name it. But in terms of this, I think that I wonder whether or not there's any link to that in terms of the stats we're seeing.
In brief, I think, yes, there are. There most certainly is a rise in high-powered, quite high-value cars of the type you alluded to. But there's also, at the other end of the scale, some of the volume, the higher volume of vehicle theft is actually at the other end. It's the theft of sort of mopeds, scooters, getting ridden around estates. In turn, interestingly, causing huge amounts of antisocial behaviour to people. So it's a combination of those two things, which are probably at sort of different ends of the scale. But yeah.
Before I hand over to Steve, my recollection is the new keyless cars that are causing the problem, isn't it? And then I remember about a year ago, Lord Bark presented a report, and I think half of stolen motor vehicles were mopeds, something along those lines. So, yeah. Steve, your first question.
Thank you, Chair. My maiden speech, so to speak. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask about the increase in millennium burglaries and whether that's actually having an effect on car crime, and are we doing any work with homeowners to try and prevent this in future?
I'm sorry, this is those vehicles stolen by means of a house burglary. We are, absolutely, because that is, you're right, actually, that is the other emerging crime type, and it links, the two are very much linked, actually. So just for the benefit of everybody, this is a scenario whereby high-powered Audis, BMWs or other makes are available, are stolen by means of a house burglary, solely to steal the car. So they'll pinch the car keys and just take the car. Most worryingly, that high-powered vehicle is then used in the commission of other serious criminality, usually armed robbery or something similar. What work are we doing? We're doing a whole load of prevention work, trying to identify people with a particular type of vehicle. I won't say any more. Engage with them, engage with people like Halfords and other stores. So we can do some work, sort of point of sale, and also obviously with the dealerships themselves around sort of prevention to prospective buyers.
Thanks for that, Roger. Over to page 28, as Helen said. Data quality and crime recording integrity, none. Performance monitoring framework, nothing. Okay, well, thank you, member. That's quite a session on the performance report, an hour and a half. Thank you for your answers, Lord Bark and Roger. All comments have been noted by Ewan, and any offers of reports, or at least coming back to the panel, like Manjula, they will be acted on. So thank you for that. So I ask you members to move over to agenda item 8. Members, the victim first update. not sure who's going to present the report. Just like it says Stuart Fraser here.
Stuart is actually in the audience, but
Yeah, I can see him. There he is.
I'm going to produce the.
But you're going to present it.
And I'm going to do it very shortly, if I may.
Of course.
This is an important topic, but the timing is not exactly is the wrong timing, because we are about to make a decision around where we go forward with Victim First. The present contract ends the end of September this year. Very advanced talks with the police, obviously, and in our office around where we should go for the future. And I want to be very careful not to say very much in public, because we are at a public meeting here, about what decision we'll take and when we'll actually take it. But I do make the offer of coming back to the next meeting with a fuller report when we can discuss the decision that's been taken, and I can gather the panel's view about it. I hope that's acceptable, Chair. Otherwise, the report speaks for itself.
On behalf of the panel, we accept that kind offer. Thank you very much. We have a number of questions, but I'll take the sections 1 and 2 are pretty simple. Background. Anything on the background? Nope. Executive summary?
Yes, Mr.
Again,
Thank you, could you just explain the correlation between 7 and 9, where you consider rejection option 2, but further discussion of PCC surrounding service delivery of option 1 and 2?
It should be 3.
Which one?
The second figure in paragraph 9 should be 3. Yes, should be 3. Thank you very much. We need someone who reads their papers very carefully.
John.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so glad the Chief Constable's not here. He gets very touchy when I ask these questions.
Surely not.
Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary said our victim performance needed improvement, yet the Victim First system appears to be working much better, and the reason for the HYC's criticism is that they are not allowed to inspect the OPCC's commissioned services. So actually, is this an opportunity to commission this via the police, thus allowing an improvement of service at a stroke? I.e., basically we need to join up the thought.
That is the one question I don't really want to answer. and I will...
Sorry, Lord Back, have you thought about it?
Yes.
End of question.
I have. I thought about the question. It's a very, very good question, but not one, if you'll forgive me, I'd rather not answer today.
Thank you very much, members. Moving on, the future of Victim First provision. Any questions on those two paragraphs? Manjula? Or did you just have your hand in the air?
Page 32. Yeah, bullet point 8. You said that consultation is underway. And when did it start and how long it will take? And it says that it's underway with 4 and I welcome that it's quality scrutiny groups. You're consulting them as well? So is it online only, or are we having face-to-face or different meetings on this consultation?
I know consultation is taking place. I don't know the answer to when it started. I think this paragraph was being looked at again this morning, and I haven't had the response. I wonder if Helen, if you don't mind, if Helen were to just to answer this particular question.
Can I just make this clear? This is page 32, paragraph 8.
Yeah. Paragraph 8, yes.
Thank you. I believe this consultation is still underway. I know who is involved in the VW PAG, because that's something I specifically asked about this morning, which involves the county, the city, the Rutland, etc. I've also asked the question about the equality groups in the third sector, particularly this morning, and I'll drop a note round to the panel if that's acceptable, Chair, after the meeting, because that was a particular area I did ask about.
Yep.
Thank you, Helen.
On behalf of Manjula, your offer is accepted for the whole panel, and that's what we would have asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen.
Members, I don't believe there are any other questions. Recommendation at 2, that we note the comments of the report. All okay? Yeah. Thank you very much. Moving over to agenda item 9, Police and Crime Act 2017, and this will be presented, I presume, by Lord Bark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think the report largely speaks for itself. Happy to answer questions on it. It's very important to draw the distinction between the duty placed in relation to possible collaborative agreements with other emergency services, in other words, the fire service and the ambulance service. That's a duty that's imposed if two of those services feel that it would be better, it would be, what's the expression in Section 2, it would be in the interests of efficiency or effectiveness of those services, then there's a duty to consider carefully an agreement, collaboration agreement. The other elements are optional. It's a matter for the Police and Crime Commissioner to decide what line to take on them. Some parts of the Act have come into force, some haven't. I think the best way, subject to your ruling on this, is for me to answer any questions, comments there may be on the Act. To say it was made, became an Act only a very short period ago.
Thank you, Lord Bark. If it helps, I have no questions at all on this one, but we will do what we normally do. On page 33, purpose of the report, recommendation, which is to note, of course, background and detail. Blue light service collaboration. Over to page 34. Rutland.
The blue light service collaboration, I think it's working in certain part of the area, but it's not working in other part of the area. I think we need a little bit awareness on that, because although I can approach, and then I know, trying to work hard in order to bring blue light in our area. But I think we need to work, because a lot of people are not aware of it, and there is that lackness, if you like, to bring that in the thingy. So, that's what my...
I agree with you. I'm absolutely in favour of collaboration. I mean, it's a duty, of course, if as I say, two of the emergency services want to act together. We do collaborate, police collaborate closely with the other emergency services. It's absolutely vital they do so for all our interests, and I encourage it as much as I can as PCC.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say that certainly in northwest Leicestershire, the police has, in an operative sense, have placed their new office, if you like, at the fire station in Colville, and that, of course, fire representatives do work with EMAS at a first response level, and therefore we do have evidence of what I seriously believe is good blue light cooperation, and I would, honestly ask if the Police and Crime Commissioner would give serious thought to any efficiencies which could be achieved in this way, because then he'll have more money to spend on front line, which is most important, and that would be an absolutely super way to go.
Thank you, Trevor, very much. Yes, I mean, that's absolutely our approach. Where there's good collaboration to be had, then we seize it. Absolutely. And I think there may be more to say about that in due course.
Yeah, I think all of us are in favour where you get the three emergency services. There has been a little bit of overlap application historically. Anything we can do to take that out and then provide more money for the front line has to be nothing short of good. Still on page 34, Fire and Rescue Service Governance. I'm looking at our fire and service. No question yet. Expert. John.
I think overall it would be helpful if the PCC could bring forward a paper, a public paper, on how he sees this all going forward. There is a great danger of, frankly, some of this being resolved behind closed doors, which would be completely unrealistic and wrong. There is an issue of whether or not a combined authority would go forward. Therefore, you may be turkeys and Christmas. However, it should be a publicly debated process and not a private process. And I think the best way to do that is to bring a paper forward.
I'm happy to do so, setting out my present view about this issue of governance. It may not be a long paper, but one that sets out my present view on it.
Accepted, Lord Bart. Thank you very much. Page 34, police complaints processes. Manjula.
Sorry, Chair, it's not about the complaint process. I want to say something positive, which should have been added here as well, that the Chief Constable in the Leicestershire Police, how it is well respected by majority of the communities, and their engagement with the communities is engaged. And Simon Cole especially, last Friday, he even drew raffle tickets out. And people never think, oh, a police chief constable doing that. And we had quiz sessions. And his commitment on mental health is very welcome, you know. So it's not only the negative side we are talking about complaints, but there are some good things. And last Friday I met a police officer, an Asian lady from West Midland Police Force, and she said, I wish I could work here because Leicestershire Police on gender balance, they are very committed. Thank you.
Well, I think on behalf of the police, and I'm, as PCC, absolutely delighted to hear what you've just said. I think Simon's capable of many things, including pulling out raffle tickets. But I think he and his senior officers, very much including his deputy who sits by my side, are the envy of many, many police forces, both around us and elsewhere in the country. We're extremely lucky, and it's kind of you to mention it, and we shouldn't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, this is on police complaint process.
Yeah, sorry. I first just add to what Manjula said. I'm happy to report that the first raffle winning ticket that the Chief Constable drew out was my wife's.
You should have had a declaration of interest early on.
Chairman, I wish I hadn't made the comment I did.
Sorry, what I really want to ask is the Fire and Rescue Service governance, if the Office of the PCC does take it on, and I know that's by no means certain, it clearly will generate a lot of extra work, and the lack of a chief executive will be having a significant impact on that. I just wondered if there's any report on how the recruiting process was going.
It's going. It's going. We're going to shortlist on Friday this week, and the appointment will be made, hopefully, on June the 27th.
Thank you, Lord Bart. Any other questions on page 34, please complaint processes? If not, over the page to 36, other impacts. And finally, conclusion at point 22, para 22. Okay. Thank you very much, members. Recommendation to be that we note contents of the report. All okay? Yes. Thanks very much, members. Time is it just before 5 to 10? Now I have here date of next panel meeting is scheduled to take place on the 26th of July 2017 at 1 p.m. Sorry, and that is at the City Council building, I've been told. One moment, Rattilal. But as Lord Barks just announced that we understand is 27th June is quite a day in the appointment of the next new chief executive. Just to remind members, there will be a short confirmation hearing. Might not be short, of course, but there will be a confirmation hearing within 3 weeks of that date, if my memory is correct on that one. I think Kirk's looking at me. Is that a yes or no? It is 3 weeks, isn't it? Yeah, it is 3 weeks. Now, Ratilawa, you had a point to make, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, about A or B issues. I did raise on the last occasion, I know you will send me an email on that subject. We would like to review or revisit on the independent panels on that next meeting. We will send you the email on that basis.
Well, obviously I was faced with the... it does clearly say here, Ratilawa will concur and so will Abdul. It does say items to be taken as urgent, so I said I won't take it, but I did invite Ratilawa and Abdul to write to me by email, so that will happen. Okay. Members, all it remains to say is thank you for your patience and well done to the new members for putting up for it for 2 hours, but you can see we have a wide ranging of issues that pop up. Certainly last but not least, thank you to Lord Bark and all his team, and the only thing that remains to me to say is safe trip home. Okay, thank you. Meeting's over.